Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Roots and Genealogy, and I'm here with a very special guest today, Candice Guardino, who is the creator and the star of the Italian Bred show. So welcome, Candice. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So we come from similar backgrounds. I am an Italian boy from Queens. I think I have a couple of years on you, maybe. Well, maybe I have a lot of years on you, but
Nah.
it was so exciting when I was, reviewing before the show and seeing how you do the things with the family, because I come from one very crazy Italian family and one not so crazy. So
Yeah.
the first thing I want to ask you is you're probably doing what all us crazy Italians would love to do and think we should do, is talk about our family. So how did you start all of this?
We all talk about our families, don't we? For me, it was something that I've always knew I wanted to do. I always wanted to create a one-person show in sort of that genre where you're impersonating characters and there's music because I sing as well, and it sort of feels as if it could be a traditional, Broadway show to a stand-up act, and I wanted to sort of combine all of those elements together because that's a little bit of what I do. I wouldn't say I'm just a stand-up comedian or I'm just a theater actor. I wanted to like mush it all together into one fun night. And then, of course, why else or what else would I talk about would be my family, because growing up in an Italian family, you impersonate everyone as a kid. That's what we did. We made fun of each other. We poked fun. We impersonated someone. I mean, my family still does that. We tease a lot. So growing up in a family like that, I always knew that if I was going to write a show, my first show out of the gate would be something that would be near and dear to me because it's so easy, right? Like
Yeah.
impersonating these family members are so easy because you've been doing it your whole life. So for me, it was like, that's the story I want to tell. And then you have to sort of sit down and say how to craft the story. So for me, it was, I knew I wanted to tell it with my grandmother as the forefront because she was such a specific human. I mean, I've never met anyone as unique as her. She is not a traditional Italian grandmother. We always think of those grandmothers with those house dresses, ugly orthopedic shoes, and rollers in their hair, and that was not my grandmother on my father's side at all. She was a complete different human that I've ever witnessed. I mean, she wore sexy dresses and spike heels and cigarettes, and she always looked like a model coming out of like a 1960s catalog up until her death, to be quite honest with you. So it was sort of that energy of just, I've never seen anyone like that. And we didn't even call her grandma. We called her Franny. So it was a definite different feel because my other grandma, my mother's mother, was like this little angel who cooked over a stove for thousands of us and always wore the house dresses. So a very different energy. But I knew if I was going to do a show, I was going to write it in the vein of the Franny character.
And that's neat. And your grandmother is probably the same age that my mom and my aunts would be. They would all be, if unfortunately none are left, but if they were left, they'd all be in their 90s, close to 100 by now.
Yeah, my grandmother, I think she'd be 88,
Yeah,
87,
yeah,
something like that she'd be
yeah.
today.
I have cousins that are 88, so there you see how old I am.
Yeah. No, I get it. Big Italian family.
But to your point, my mom's mom was that very boisterous kind of Italian grandmother. They came from Italy, so she had the accent. And I was just saying to my wife the other day, my grandmother would say, "Get me an apple." An apple, right? Yeah, I don't know. And the younger kids didn't understand. What?
Right.
And my dad's mom, and then my mother's family, they were farmers from Torito, Bari. My dad's family, his dad was a little bit more gentry, and his mom was from nobility. So she was a very, very stately woman.
Right.
And when my grandfather passed away, he died when I was like 2 months old. She wore black from the day he died until the day she died.
Oh, goodness. Oh,
My
goodness.
mom's mom wore the black dress for 3 days and then went back to the Vestalia, and that was it. She was just, grandma again. And the old Italian ladies didn't like that, and she
Yeah.
said, what am I going to do?
Right. I mean, my grandmother, it's actually quite odd that I'm going to tell this story, but my grandmother, I used to spend time with her. She lived on Ocean Parkway in Brooklyn. And I remember spending a day with her, and she said, we have to, I have to do errands. And we had to go to a funeral of a friend. And I was maybe 7 or 8.
That was an errand.
That was an errand. And she took me on the date to the funeral. And she wore this red, sparkly dress, very tight fitting to a funeral. And I remember everyone being in black. And I thought, she looks odd. We're dressed in regular clothes, and she's got this bright red outfit on. And I remember asking her later, I was like, why, everyone was in black. Why weren't we in black? She goes, why were they in black? And I was like, all right. That was her answer. Her answer was like, why do we have to be in black? Like there was no real reason to her to wear black. And it wasn't honoring or dishonoring in her eyes. It was just, this is what I want to wear. So we went.
Yeah. Well, growing up in the 50s and early 60s, funerals were just, that was a way of life in the Italian family.
Yeah, of course,
It went for 3 days, morning and night.
Yes, we're screaming over the casket. I know. Trust me, I know. We're all there. I've been to those as a child, and I'm like, oh, very dramatic these are.
But we ate well, because in between everybody went back to my grandmother's and ate. And they only lived like 3 blocks from the funeral home. So that, we would sit on the chairs from the funeral home and all of that.
Yeah, they knew a guy, as my dad.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I was going to ask you, but you mentioned it. So I figured your family made the transition from Brooklyn to Staten Island at some point. So when did your, whether it was your grandparents or great grandparents, when did they get to the United States?
Yeah, so my grandmother, both of my grandmothers, came from Italy when they were about a year old.
Oh, it's very young.
Yeah, very young. My great grandmother, neither of them spoke English. I mean, it was purely Italian. So I remember as a kid not understanding them and having to learn a lot. Both of my grandmothers being about a year or 2 old, being here in Brooklyn, that was growing up was Brooklyn for them. And my parents, for sure, like they are 1,000% Brooklynites, as I'd like to say. But when they made the transition, I was born in Brooklyn. I think I was about 2 or 3 when they made the transition over to Staten Island. And as my mom always tells me, she said, I told everyone in the family that we were moving to the country. And I was like, the country? She's like, Candice, there were cows and grass and everything in Staten Island. It was very country to my mom. It is not that now. It's mainly concrete jungle is what we call it. It's like a concrete village. But I had a great childhood in Staten Island. I very much praise Staten Island, even though I know it's gotten such bad press, or I should say a bad rap in the years, in the past couple of years. But for sure, I praised it because, and I still do, I had a wonderful childhood. It was very unique. It was sort of like everyone from Brooklyn came to Staten Island. And growing up in Staten Island, I went to school, and I make this joke in the show, but it's actually very true. I went to school with boys. Everyone was named Vinny, Anthony, or Joey. There was no other names, and everyone's last name ended in an O and I, and there was no, we were all sort of the same. It was very odd. And I remember thinking that as a child, being like, we are all very similar. There's definitely more other types of people out there. I just don't know it. I'm a child. I was 6 or 7. And I remember thinking that. But everyone in Staten Island was named Vinny, Anthony, or Joey. And I actually grew up on Anthony Street because that was the name of my street. It was very unique. But it was a great place to grow up. And, everyone's door was always open. I have, till this day, best friends that I grew up with on Staten Island. And it's sort of, I celebrate that for sure. It's sort of a mix of Brooklyn that just kind of migrated to Staten Island. And then my parents did the traditional thing, which they sold their home and went to Jersey.
Well, that's what I am. I'm in Jersey.
There you go. There's the real migration. It goes from Italy to Brooklyn to Staten Island, and then Jersey, and then you probably die in Florida. I don't know. That's what my father says. He goes, "We're gonna die in Florida." Oh, that's very nice.
I don't know a lot about Staten Island, although I did have a little girlfriend there back when maybe I was 15 or 16.
Sure you did. It's like a bubble. I call it a bubble. It's like you literally are on your own island. I remember meeting, when I went to school, I started to go to, the city a lot. And I remember meeting, Manhattanites and people who were from all over the world. And they would say, "Where's Staten Island?" And I was like, "It's right. You know that orange ferry?" And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "That's the island the ferry goes to." And they're like, no, it really is its own bubble. But it feels as if the whole world is centered around you in Staten Island, and that is all that matters, because you grow up on such this tight-knit community that you almost feel like anything outside of it you don't even care about, because you don't even know it exists. It's like this bubble. That's how I grew up.
Yeah, and I grew up in College Point,
Oh, yeah.
which was, I mean, literally in the 50s. That was, even though it was New York City, you would never know it. Nobody went there.
Right.
It was just, it was a peninsula, and there was nothing there for anybody to go to except for us. And we were probably one of the earliest Italian families that got there. But I want to ask you a little bit about your family, because I had some really crazy aunts and uncles. I had an Aunt Mary, of course. I think every Italian has, everybody who doesn't.
I had a great Aunt Mary. I had a few.
And she was the funniest of my mom's sisters. There were three girls. Aunt Mary was definitely the life of the party. And whenever something was going on, she would be the first one to start singing the Italian songs. And, when the girls in the 60s would wear, the halter bras or things like that, she used to call them trampolines.
Perfect.
And everybody was a Frigoli, so.
Yeah, exactly.
And probably my Uncle Mike was the funniest brother. And Uncle Mike, if there was no place to sit and you said, "Where should I sit?" he would say, "Why don't you sit on this?"
And rotate.
Yes. So what, besides your grandmother, what kind of interesting characters did you have in the family that you kind of play off of?
I have so many. It's so funny though, because I do 6 characters in the show. I have my mother, my father, my sister, I have my grandmother, and then I play a few side characters that sort of just field a story and move a story along. But those are the main characters. And I play myself, obviously, in all ages, but it's like from basically 5 years old up until now. And I will say every character is different. My mother is a unique character because we joke about it in our house, but I call it the supposed to book. My mother has rules in which things should happen. It's supposed to happen this way. And then you think about it and you were like, that was really not normal. Like everything was very laid out about life and how you handle things. And when you don't, oh no, you don't say that. And I'm like, but you have to speak, Ma. And she has a very unique way of looking at life. Going to church on all the respective holidays, and you have to do it because you're supposed to. Like it's very the supposed to book. And then there's my dad, who's totally even keel. Poor man grew up surrounded by women. Of course he owned his own auto body shop, and then I grew up around cars, and I'm probably the only girl who could change a tire immediately. It was that sort of thing. I grew up like that. And my grandmother being so different, so eccentric. I mean, this is the type of woman who, oh God, for years, my last name was Garden. I went to school as Candice Garden. And then somewhere around 15 years old, I found a box in my dad's basement, and I asked, what is all this about? And he was like, I don't even know. He's like, it's your grandmother's. And we end up finding out our last name is actually Gardino, and we're related to Harry Gardino, the actor. Yeah. And she had all his journals, and we thought, well, why didn't you tell us this? She's like, well, I hated my ex-husband, so I drove to Mexico to get a divorce, and I chopped off the O of Gardino because I didn't want to be associated with him, and I gave you a new last name. And I just remember my father standing there in shock, being like, wait a minute. I thought that he just thought our name was changed when people came over. We just didn't, something happened and now we're just Garden. He didn't connect it. And it was just this huge thing where we were like, what? So these sort of stories happened with her that, of course, she was a very eccentric character. But I have aunts and uncles, and I have I have 7, 8 cousins, and they all have 4 children. And I have such eccentric family members that I often get asked, they're like, are you going to write a part 2? And are we going to be in it? I want to know, they're very eccentric. And no, I'm not going to put them all in it. I'm too tired. That's a lot of work.
It is,
a lot of characters, as it is. These characters were enough to get under the wing. And a character that most people when they see the show really love is actually my sister. She's so funny. There's this unique accent my sister has always had, where it's sort of like a valley girl that you think she's from California and she's not, but she's always, and she can't pronounce things correctly. Like my name is Candice and she says Candice, and everything is like so annoying to her. And she hates it when I'm being nice. Like she's that sort of human, and like we all know someone like that, right? Like, and so she is a very relatable character that I think goes beyond just a family member. We all know someone just like her.
Yeah, and that's funny because my mother's oldest sister, my Aunt Anne, my mother told a story one time where she would try to put on airs, and my uncles used to refer to my mother and her sisters as the Gabor sisters.
Love
They
it.
all had, yeah, my one of the sister-in-laws, my aunt was a beautician, so they had the silver hair and the whole thing going, or the blonde hair, I guess at the time, with the flip and all of that kind of
The
stuff.
flip, I love it.
And one time, either they were going into Canada or coming back. I think probably coming back, because my Uncle John lived there for 5 years with his family. When my grandparents came, he stayed behind. He was a young boy and stayed with his grandparents.
Wow.
And they were supposed to go back. So they would go visit. And one time they asked my aunt, where she was born. And she said New York, but she said it with like New York or something.
New York, yeah.
And they didn't believe her. But another funny story about that, her husband, she was very straight-laced, my aunt, and my Uncle Nick was completely off the rails. And when they went to Canada, my oldest cousin from my uncle was there, and she was very upset. She was the only girl there. She lived in a boarding house with all men. Even though my uncle was there, she was very unhappy. And my Uncle Nick said, "Come with us, come." And my aunt said, "You can't take her." And he said, "Yeah." So they rigged up the back seat of the car to hide her.
Wow.
And he drove her over the bridge, and nobody else would go in the car with him.
Yeah, just in case he got caught.
Because he got caught. But the funny part of the story that I just recently learned, she met her husband here in America and she couldn't get married. So they had to smuggle her back into Canada so she could get married there.
They gotta fix that.
But my dad worked for the Daily News. He was a photographer.
Oh.
And his beat was Brooklyn for probably 15, 16 years.
Oh, I believe.
And then he was in Queens. So, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, his picture, we were minor celebrities in town because
yeah.
either he, if he got the front page or he got the centerfold, that was a big deal. But then we were always in the paper.
Of course.
Snowstorms, hot weather, and hurricanes. We would be,
So
we'd
funny.
be
Might
posing
as
in the
well.
paper.
Get your
Well,
family shoveling.
And he has my mother in 1947 when they were, I think my brother was only a few months old. My mom shoveling the snow in front of the house and in the paper. So, like I said, we were kind of minor celebrities.
Yeah.
But one of the fun things that we had growing up, and I don't know if you had anything like this, was my mother there were 9 in her family. There were 23 grandchildren.
Wow.
And 30 something great grandchildren.
Oh, goodness.
And we'd all be in my grandmother's yard, on her birthday or Mother's Day and things like that. And my uncles would have a talent contest. So all the kids, we would dance, or we would do this, or we would sing, whatever you wanted to do. And my grandfather's sister, Zia Raquel, she would play the piano. Da, 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 da. We didn't know what that meant, but
of course we didn't. They were trying to entertain you kids. How do you keep everyone entertained?
Well, yeah, no, exactly. And then they throw quarters at us or things like that.
Yeah.
And, it was always great fun growing up. And I'm looking for, I know you're coming to Jersey in April, I think. Is that still on? Or
yeah. The funny part is, it's not funny, but the ironic part is these theaters having to close and then having to open again and then close again. We've actually figured out that we will postpone, and all these theaters will say, let's just push the date back. Let's not cancel. Let's push it back another month. So we're sort of seeing how the restrictions are being lifted. If it happens, yes, we'll be there. If not, we're thinking summertime for sure. I have about 7 or 8 big performances in the summer that I think will be great. We'll have a few in Jersey. We'll have some in Philly, some in Boston, just to sort of get back. And being outside, I think, will be a little safer for everyone. I think they'll just feel better, and I think theaters will feel better. So I believe we'll have a very full summer. So I'm looking forward to spring. So just to like get back to things a little bit. So slowly but surely, theaters are coming back. I just think they're taking their time. But they've been wonderful. They've been calling and saying, oh, let's keep the date, please, or let's push back. And we want you, and we want entertainment. Like, that's the thing. Everyone misses entertainment.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing here in Jersey is my sister lives in Long Beach, Long Island, and they have a lot of outdoor events on the beach, on the boardwalk, on the stages, and we don't really have, other than the Stone Ponies outdoor stage, we don't have a lot of that.
I know. We did a performance maybe 2 years ago at the Paramount in Asbury, which is right on that boardwalk. Yep. We're going to maybe chat with them and see if there's something we can do outdoors for the summer, because I think outdoors is going to be just easier. I don't want to say an easier sell, but an easier mental thing for everyone, right? Like, okay, it's outdoors. I feel safe. And I think maybe next year, 2022, I think the indoors will be all fine. But I think it's going to take a full year for everyone to be like running back to a Broadway theater,
Yeah, and I'm on a hunt for the vaccine. Every morning I make my rounds around all the sites to find out that there isn't any.
Yeah, sometimes you can go to...
How about have your parents been able to get it?
No, not yet. I have a few friends that are nurses, and they're like, go to these vaccination points where they're giving them. And sometimes if you wait till the end of the day, there's some left over.
Yeah,
I don't know how true that is, but
I heard that too.
Have been doing that.
Yeah.
But no, not yet. But I have to do it for them, because God forbid I tell them to, try to figure out a computer. My mother's like, I don't understand. My dad's like, the computer's talking to me. I'm like, forget it. I'll do it.
Well, even if you know how to do it, it's just insane. I go, I'm registered at a few places that they say they'll get back to you, but you don't. I'm registered with Monmouth County. I'm registered with New Jersey, and they send emails. Thank you for registering. We'll let you know. So, I mean, I think eventually it'll have it. We were supposed to be in Italy last April.
I know.
And that got canceled, and I was like depressed, so depressed.
It's very hard, right? Like the joke that my husband and I have, which is when, the virus hit, we had in 48 hours, I had 48 gigs stop cold. Like It was that quickly. We had so many upcoming dates that we were planning to announce, and plus the ones that were already announced for the whole year. It was like a funnel, and I thought, oh my God, is this happening? Like, this is really happening, that they are shutting down everything. So it's not really a joke, but it's how we get through things. I get through things by laughter and sarcasm, and so we always joke about it. And my husband's like, 48 hours, 48 gigs gone. I'm like, man, it was quick. But yes, everyone sort of had their life stop, right? But I take it as a sign to look inward. I wrote a lot over the last year, which is great. More material, took care of some health stuff. Everyone's healthy. And that's the other thing. Hopefully your family's all good. That's the best thing we can do, right? Yeah. The small little wins is what got me through the year.
Well, yeah, and that's all you can. That's all you can do. I mean, we're both retired, so not going any place isn't that much of a burden on us. My son's just finishing up his master's degree and works at the local gas station. And my daughter's a nurse. She actually had it.
Oh, she did. Okay. How'd she feel?
She was fine. I mean, I think she has a smell back and all of that, but she eventually, she donated plasma and stuff like that, but she's on she wanted to be a travel nurse. So she's out in Las Vegas. So she's having a grand old time, and we sit around here worrying all day.
I know. I was going to say, God bless her, but yes, she's like, I got it. And you're the parent. Parents worry. So there you go.
And Italian parents worry more than any other parents.
Forget it. My mother worries if I got to go to the store. What store? Where are you going? I saw someone not wearing a mask in that store. I'm like, Mom, it's fine. It's just an Italian mom. It is what it is. That's who they are.
And I just before we got on, I listened to the Wells story, which I thought was fabulous. But your mom went and got the police.
Yes, absolutely.
I fell off my bike one time a couple blocks away. I was going down a hill and I hit the sand and I slid off. Luckily I didn't hit my head or anything like that. But I was probably 12, 13, and a gentleman picked me up. And I could tell the story now because my mom's not with us anymore and she will yell at me. But a gentleman picked me up and he said, "Where do you live?" I said, "I live 2 blocks away." And he took me home, but he left the bike there. Mm-hmm. So I come in the house and I'm, my arms like this. And my mom said, "What happened?" I fell off my bike. "Where's the bike?"
It's true.
"It's down the street." "I'm going to get the bike."
It's true. That is such a, oh God, I don't want to say a perfect stereotype of Italians, but it is because, and I don't have this in the show, but like I have a portion of this, which is the first time I was driving my father's car and I did get in a car accident and I called and I had to say, "Hey, I got in a car accident." And my father said, "What does the car look like?" I was like, "Dad, I'm okay." And you hear my mother in the background, "Are you all right?" Like my mother's screaming, "Are you all right?" My father's like, "Take a picture of the car." Here I am taking pictures of this car at 17, being like, "Oh, it's hitting the front." And he's like, "Oh," it was like a big dramatic thing. But that's 1,000%. That's what Italians do, right? It's like the material things are important because they work so hard for those material things. Right? Like my dad reminds me every day that the first car that he ever got was something he had to put together because he swept out an auto body shop. Like they're so rooted in how they got that material thing. So that, by the way, that material thing will last forever. My dad still takes out stuff and he's like, "I bought this in 1960. I'm like, "You should throw out this vacuum." He's like, "No, it was my mother's. It's a great vacuum." I'm like, "This Electrolux is 40 years old, but they still use it."
Yeah. The Electrolux. Yeah, I remember those.
Yes.
So I want to ask you one more question. So the show isn't just for anybody, even non-Italians are welcome.
Yes. I will say, obviously, if you're Italian, you will feel as if the joke is something you've already said, or you would be like, "I went through that situation." If you're not Italian, which I get audiences that are always not Italian, it just happens, right? People are interested in Italians. Usually the audience member that isn't Italian says, "Oh my God, I know a family like this." Or they say, "Believe it or not, just recently I had an email sent to me from a woman who is, she's Russian and she has a big Russian family of like 14 people. And she said, 'Your show is exactly like my family.'" And I giggled because I thought, "Is it?" And then she said, "It is. We're all the same." And then I had a Latino family write me an email and they were so sweet. And they were like, "We are exactly like that. We do the same thing." And it's just in a different form. We're not making, spaghetti and meatballs. We're making something else, or we're arguing about one thing, but it's the same idea. So at the end of the day, I realized, but it took me a bit because at first when you're touring your show, you think, "Oh God, is this going to work outside of, an East Coast city where Italians are just living?" But it started to, form a shape of its own. And I think I started to realize that, man, family is so universal and really everybody starts to relate to it in their own way. They either have a grandmother just like that, know of a woman just like that. This situation happened to me. So at the end of the day, I'm very happy to say that it's just not Italians. It's everyone.
Yeah, no. And to your point, if you catch somebody like, Sebastian Maniscalco, who,
Yes.
does all the Italian stereotypes that, all my Irish friends, or they could all relate to it too, because they know us so well, and
Right.
it's
They have a friend, or they're like, "Oh my God, I do the same thing. I didn't realize that." I had a friend who said to me, "I do that. I didn't realize that's an Italian thing." I was like, "Well, it's not an Italian, it just so happens."
right.
But it's relatable.
So I'm going to send you the little song that I wrote about my Italian family.
I love it. Send it to me.
When my cousin Frank was about 16 and sat on the ravioli that was drying on the couch.
Oh my God, did the couch have plastic? Because then you're fine.
Actually it didn't, but they spread a sheet on it.
Oh God.
And then my uncle would put the raviolis out to dry, and Frank, I don't know how he missed them. They were like 12 dozen raviolis there, and he sat on the raviolis.
Oh my God, I love it. But they're fresh though. They're fresh raviolis.
My uncle he'd roll it out with a rolling pin, like a big dowel and paper thin. Oh, I'm getting hungry just thinking about it.
I know, right?
And so where will people find you if they want to book the show, or where can they listen to you?
Yeah. So obviously, if you want to come see the show, you can go to Italian Bred, but it's BRED, like born and bred. So italianbredshow.com/tickets. And we're going to be updating the website probably this week. So by this March of 2021, there'll be all updated shows. And you can find all the information about the show there. You can find everything about me at CandiceGardino.com. We have social media for both things, Instagram, the whole bit. It's easy to find us.
Yeah, except for your parents, right? They can't.
Oh, no, my parents, please. My parents can't find it. My dad doesn't want to be on the computer. He said to me, I don't want my information for anyone to find it. I was like, Dad, oh God, trying to make him understand that like we're already have a footprint
Yeah.
on the internet in some way. And he's like, not me. I don't have social media. I'm like, that doesn't mean, like, it's so hard to explain. I just let it go. I'm like, you're right. No one knows you exist. Yes, you're hiding.
Well, thanks again. This has been such great fun. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. And I always like to say this because I think it's so true. Thank you for celebrating Italian heritage because I don't think enough people do. So I appreciate
Well,
that.
there's more and more.